This was unthinkable.
Europe has to be very careful. They're doing a lot of things. We want to keep Europe Europe. Europe is going in some bad directions.
America cannot and will not accept that, and we think it's a terrible mistake.
Any reaction on the fine that was imposed to X by the European?
For what?
To X, to the platform X, the fine.
That was pretty amazing. You're talking about, is that European Union or is it?
The United States has just sent a message to Ursula von der Leyen so blunt, it shatters the illusion of partnership and strips her leadership bare. Under von der Leyen, the European Commission has become a punishment engine that censors speech, crushes American companies with billion-dollar fines, and demands economic submission dressed up as cooperation. Washington is done playing along because this showdown was written into law and timed for 2026, with no escape hatch left for Europe.
The Trump administration has banned former European Union Commissioner Thierry Breton and 4 anti-disinformation campaigners from entering the United States. As commissioner, Breton helped formulate the EU's Digital Services Act, which Washington says unfairly targets U.S. tech giants. The European Commission.
Ursula von der Leyen triggered the rupture by turning speech governance into a financial weapon, and Washington noticed immediately. Brussels says the Digital Services Act protects users from harmful content and manipulation after years of election and moderation scandals. The EU argues American platforms acted like unaccountable digital sovereigns, profiting from Europe while ignoring its laws.
On European citizens who say they're trying to combat online hate and disinformation. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced those bans yesterday. They target 5 specific individuals. One of them is former European Commissioner Thierry Breton.
But here's where justification meets execution. The Digital Services Act drags any platform with 45 million monthly EU users into permanent regulatory supervision. Once inside that zone, political speech, algorithms, and election content fall under bureaucratic risk management rather than public debate, shifting power from citizens to regulators who decide acceptable discourse.
Look, here in the European Union, but of course several US tech giants have been embroiled in and have faced large, substantial fines for not adhering to those rules.
The enforcement scale explains the shock, penalties up to 6% of global annual revenue. For major US platforms, billions of dollars now ride on Brussels' judgment calls rather than court rulings, incentivizing preemptive censorship because financial fear works faster than legal appeals.
The Commission has issued a fine of €120 million to X for breaching the Digital Services Act.
In December 2025, the Commission imposed a $120 million fine over transparency and platform design. Content architecture itself became punishable. Von der Leyen's mistake was assuming the United States would absorb this quietly, but Washington responded with an immediate warning shot that signaled the tolerance threshold had been crossed.
The first ever fine under the DSA. X has indeed breached its transparency obligation under the DSA.
The conflict hardened from speech into money and retaliation. In September 2023, the Commission designated 6 gatekeepers under the Digital Markets Act: Apple, Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, and ByteDance. 5 are American.
This fee structure unfairly disadvantages European developers compared to their US rivals and follows a recent court decision in the United States. The
EU's case was documented. Apple's App Store monopoly forced developers into 30% commission fees with no alternatives. Google bundled its search engine and Chrome browser to crush competitors. Amazon used third-party seller data to launch competing products. Meta's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp ecosystem locked users into a surveillance advertising machine. Brussels argued these weren't competitive markets. They were digital fiefdoms extracting rent from captive populations.
Has imposed fines of €500 million to Apple and €200 million to Meta for breaching the Digital Markets Act. Apple is indeed breaching its anti-steering obligations under the DMA.
The DMA authorizes fines up to 10% of global annual revenue, rising to 20% for repeat violations. Existential financial pressure, where a single ruling can erase years of profits. Then, Brussels proved it would pull the trigger. In April 2025, the Commission fined Apple $500 million and Meta $200 million. delivering $700 million in penalties in the first major enforcement wave. That was a demonstration of force.
Now, America cannot and will not accept that, and we think it's a terrible mistake, not just for the United States of America, but for your own countries.
Von der Leyen hard-coded the confrontation into the calendar. The EU AI Act entered into force on 3rd August 2024 and became fully applicable on 2nd August 2026, landing exactly when US firms dominate frontier AI models, cloud compute, and large-scale deployment.
On the AI revolution before us with the spirit of openness and collaboration. But to create that kind of trust, we need international regulatory regimes that fosters the creation of AI technology rather than strangles it.
Brussels justifies the AI Act as necessary governance for systems that can discriminate in hiring, deny loans based on flawed algorithms, enable mass surveillance, and generate deepfakes that destabilize democracies. The EU watched American AI labs race toward artificial general intelligence with minimal oversight, and decided someone had to impose guardrails before these systems became too powerful to regulate.
These? Who needs enemies? President Trump tearing into the European Union as it escalates its war on American technology.
But timing tells a different story. Violations trigger fines up to $35 million, or 7% of global annual revenue, whichever is higher. The law reaches general-purpose AI models, foundation systems, and high-risk applications in hiring, finance, healthcare, and biometric identification. Any company placing AI systems on the EU market falls under its reach.
Harris, he said it could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off. Mr. Van said that the US will not only foster growth of AI technology, but also find ways to prevent adversaries from being able to use it to surveil and threaten people. His speech goes against calls from EU leaders for more regulation.
From a US standpoint, Europe is inserting itself into the command layer of the AI economy. Regulation shifts from outcomes to architecture, from safety claims to model behavior, from national jurisdiction to extraterritorial control. AI leadership becomes conditional on Brussels approval rather than Silicon Valley innovation.
They're not doing a good job, Europe. It's not doing a good job in many ways. They're not doing a good job.
I want to ask
They
you
talk
about
too
that.
much, and they're not producing. We're talking about Ukraine.
The numbers favor escalation. In 2024, total EU-US trade in goods and services reached $1.6 trillion more than $4.2 billion crossing the Atlantic daily. The goods balance is the pressure point. The EU exported $531.6 billion in goods to the United States, while importing $333.4 billion, leaving a $198.2 billion EU surplus. That single figure justifies tariffs or retaliatory measures in any tariff-first White House briefing.
We will not allow a windmill to be built in the United States. They're killing us. They're killing the beauty of our scenery, our valleys, our beautiful plains. And I'm not talking about airplanes. I'm talking about beautiful plains, beautiful...
Von der Leyen's climate agenda collides with US trade interests. The Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, converts EU climate policy into border costs on foreign producers. It entered a transitional phase on 1st October 2023, requiring emissions reporting through 2025. From 2026 onward, those reports become financial obligations through carbon certificates affecting steel, aluminum, cement, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen, core US manufacturing and energy supply chains.
They talk, but they don't produce. And the war just keeps going on and on. But most European nations, they're decaying. They're decaying.
The EU frames CBAM as a climate necessity. Without it, European manufacturers face unfair competition from countries with lax environmental standards, creating a carbon leakage problem where production simply moves to dirtier jurisdictions. Brussels argues it's leveling the playing field, not tilting it.
At the end of the 18th, I said, isn't that a shame? What a shame. You have the same thing all over Europe in particular. You have windmills.
Washington sees disguised protectionism. Climate targets become trade barriers. Carbon accounting becomes a tariff mechanism. U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai warned in late 2024 that CBAM could violate WTO rules and trigger countermeasures. Meanwhile, Brussels pours $43+ billion into domestic chip capacity to cut reliance on American technology. Regulation pressures from the front, subsidies replace from the back. Cooperation shifts to displacement.
Data between the European Union and the United States is collapsing with the purges of government workers and the politicalization of independent oversight organizations in the United States.
The most dangerous pressure point is data flows. The EU-US Data Privacy Framework, adopted 10 July 2023, allows American companies to legally move data from Europe to the United States. But that permission is political, not permanent. The European Commission can suspend it.
Environmentalists, they're political hacks. These are people that they almost want to harm the country. But you look at these beautiful landscapes all over the,
This framework emerged only after the EU's top court struck down 2 previous data transfer agreements, citing concerns about US intelligence agencies' access to European data under programs like PRISM. Brussels demanded stronger privacy protections. Washington called it regulatory blackmail, disguised as civil liberties advocacy.